we're going to shift focus in terms of age group a little bit. I'm going to be talking about young adults. And one of the takeaways of this session will be that digital divide is an important concept, but we need to move on from it. So I suspect most of you in this room have heard that term, and it refers to the haves and have-nots, who has access to the internet and who doesn't. But in reality, while that approach suggests that once you've crossed over into having access and using technologies, everything is yay, okay. In fact, just because someone has access to technology, as we heard even in Ellen's talk right now, doesn't mean that people are effective and efficient users. So I think it's actually more helpful to think about it in terms of a spectrum and use the term digital inequality to describe it, in that people who don't use internet at all, obviously that's a tricky position, but even if you have access, you might still not have effective and efficient access. So why do I say this? You can have old technology versus new technology. You could have be an internet user, but be using really low quality service connectivity. You could have unlimited data or limited data. That makes a difference. And it may be that you're completely left to your own devices if you run into problems, or it could be that you have a great support network of family, friends, and peers who help you when you run into problems. So these are all differences that may exist even among people who are themselves users of digital media. What I've done a lot in my research is show that all of these factors of having different types of internet access result in differentiated web use skills. And I've published a lot on this. Due to time, I'll just touch upon a few data points here. But first, I wanted to explain what I mean by skill. I mean it to be a very broad concept where we go from anything like basic understanding of and awareness of what's even possible with technologies, which it turns out many people actually lack. And if you don't know something is possible, you're probably not doing it and not taking advantage of it. Another issue is efficient information seeking. So it's common just to tell people just Google it, but in fact, it's not that simple. Depending on what you're looking for, it may actually require a more refined understanding of search. Then when you find information, you also need to be able to assess its credibility. So that's another type of skill that's important. Additionally, how much are people participating? Increasingly, we have very popular websites like Wikipedia, one of the most popular websites, that in theory are created by anybody, but in reality we know are created by very few. In fact, the traditional types of people whose voices we hear, which is white men, are by far the most likely to edit a site like Wikipedia. So just because people have access doesn't mean that they're contributing their voices to online conversations. And finally, issues of privacy and security, increasingly important, and again, an area where people don't necessarily have the necessary skills to protect themselves. I'm here to bust some myths. One of them is that all young people are automatically savvy with technologies just because they were born with it. And the other one is that just because some people grew up with technology means that they're automatically savvier than their older counterparts. So I'm your digital mythbuster for the day. And so here are some characteristics that we believe to be true of the next generation, that is people who've grown up with technologies. But do we really know empirically that it's true? And it turns out we don't. The evidence of my work and work of others suggests that while some of these assumptions are in fact true, that yes, young people have grown up with technologies and most of them do use technologies quite a bit, it is not the case that they're doing many, many different things online necessarily, and it is definitely not the case that they're all savvy with technologies. Just a couple of data points, as I mentioned. So here's a multiple choice question that I asked of several hundred young adults. If you know what BCC means, this is not really a trick question. You can probably figure out from the options what the right answer is. But it turns out that a third of young adults could not get this right. So think about the people entering the workforce and what kind of awkward situations will come of them using email in certain ways. I'm sure you can all think of situations. And then we have another issue, just another data point, which is people not really understanding web addresses. And why is this important? It's important partly to assessing the credibility of content. It's important to avoid phishing or identity theft. And here, I think these numbers are truly shocking. Again, if you know the web, this is not really a trick question, but it turns out that only 12% of young adults were able to get this answer right. So hopefully I'm busting that myth that all young people are necessarily savvy with the internet just because they were born at the time of technologies. Another question that I've explored in the realm of several factors, gender, race, ethnicity, and socioeconomic status, but I will just report on one point here in the interest of time, is how it turns out skills is very much related to people's position in society. So people from less privileged backgrounds are in fact less skilled at using the internet than those who are from more privileged backgrounds. So we're seeing a perpetuation of inequality potentially through the internet. Now, one of the questions I often get is, okay, well, fine, there's some difference, but people probably learn over time, so their skills will improve. So in this study, I've been able to follow the same young adults over time. So I've collected over the years data about the same people over time, which is very unique, but very helpful, and have found that in fact, while it is the case that people's skills go up with respect to certain internet know-how, the differences in socioeconomic status actually remain over time. So that's potentially very discouraging. And the other issue here is that, of course, the internet changes every day, so there are new things to know every day. So probably with the newer things as well, it's the more privileged to pick up on them first. So this is an issue that might continue longer term. I've written papers on all sorts of online activities and looking at how skill might matter with respect to those activities. And in pretty much all of the cases, find that those who are more skilled are more likely to be more actively involved online. Just one slide in terms of across generations, what do we know in terms of people of different ages? So based on a nationally representative sample, showed that both income and education, even for people of all ages, are related to skills. So again, those who are more privileged understand the internet better. However, for people 50 and under, we actually see no relationship between age and skill. So that's important to recognize as well. So why is it helpful to focus on skill? Well, I've shown that socioeconomic status is one factor that's related to internet uses and skills. That's not something that's easy to fix quickly, the changes there and opportunities. However, skill is something where intervention may very well have very significant payoffs. And so having also shown that that generational differences don't necessarily exist the way we assume, it's important to recognize that classrooms may very well be a place of intervention, right? So we're not doing any favors to young adults or children by not offering technological education and support because we assume that they know everything when we know that they don't. And there are, in fact, teachers who can help them. And in fact, specifically, there are librarians who are trained to help in these things. So we really need to be taking advantage of that resource in schools. So the takeaways, to sum up, instead of the digital divide, we should think about the term digital inequality to recognize the spectrum of differences that exist even among users. So even after people have crossed into being users, there's still significant differences that exist in how people use the internet. Skills in particular, so the effective, efficient uses of the internet and digital media is an important area where people very much differ with consequences for their internet uses. And finally, don't believe the myth that young adults are necessarily digitally savvy just because they grew up with technology. It doesn't mean that they are, and we're doing a disservice to them and frankly society as a whole if we assume so and don't educate them to be more informed citizens. So I thank the funders of the project and look forward to our Q&A later. Thank you.